Another great guest. We've been so lucky this week. Aaron Nagler of Cheesehead TV has sat down to join us at the table. Aaron, it's a pleasure to have you. I like your work. Our paths have not crossed, but maybe more than once or twice. This is awesome, man. Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Is this the exact type of function and location that like Cheesehead TV is all about? Like you've probably met Packers fans from all over the country, and there was a Packers fan with an Irish accent that I met in the bathroom. I don't know if he was from Ireland, but stands to reason. Like this is what Cheesehead TV is about, right?
Absolutely. Packers fans worldwide. Got to get it.
Cool.
Got to get connected to the fandom across the globe. And that's the thing there. You know, week 1 in Brazil, we went down, had a function the night before, and it was incredible. Been out and about this week here in New Orleans. I ran into a Packers fan just this afternoon going out to lunch. He's wearing a Jordan Love jersey, and he's like, Nagler! You know, that's cool. People are everywhere, and they're so passionate about the team and the players, and obviously their success. And the Sterling Sharpe thing last night. That's cool. Everyone talking about that today. I love it. You can't move for Packers fans. It's great.
Are there different dialects? Do you get different takes? Do you get different approaches from different sects of Packers fandom?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's interesting. The ones you meet in life are always really nice and enthusiastic. It's the people on the internet who are less than kind. But no, yeah, everyone's just really thrilled at, just being at the Super Bowl, and obviously the Packers having won such a pivotal, iconic moment when Favre and company came down here and won it. In Super Bowl 31. And it's funny because right behind you is the New Orleans chapter, and they've had all these famous clips from Super Bowls played here in New Orleans. And so I've seen Brett and Desmond on loop like all week. It's so nostalgic. You absolutely love it.
And delicious food as well. And by the way, you said on the internet, I think coming to this event is great because you get this preconceived notion of, well, that person's a douche and and then you meet them in person. It's like, we're all very normal, and most everyone is very nice.
Most of them
I'm sure there's a jerk. I didn't meet any.
Right.
Or didn't talk to them long enough or on a deep enough level
to find out.
Yeah,
right,
to find out. So I try not to get jaded or complain about different topics that are kind of taking hold in the Packers space because it's good content, right? Like, I'm not going to complain, but I'm so over this number 1 wide receiver thing because if you listen to the national shows, they talk about the Packers like they're playing golden retrievers at wide receiver.
I know.
Like they're doing it a way that no other team is doing it.
Right.
I get that Jacobs got it started, but what is your kind of reaction, Ben, to all that conversation?
Well, I think it's great fodder, but I don't think it kind of rolls off the back of the people inside 1265 Lombardi,
Most
right?
things do.
But the thing I keep saying is, like, if you think that these comments like cause any kind of like consternation or a ripple of effect inside the building, I as far as the personnel group goes, it's just, I mean, Brian Gutekunst wouldn't kowtow to Aaron Rodgers when it came to how he wanted to build his roster. I'm very happy that Josh has some suggestions, but I don't think Goody's too worried about it.
Yeah, what do you make of the Goody comments in his end of the year presser when he said, kind of unprompted, it's time to start competing for championships?
It's so funny because I think every Packers fan kind of sat up. You know that meme where somebody's sitting up and then all of a sudden you lean forward? I think that's a lean forward moment. There's no doubt about it because, like you said, it was unprompted.
He didn't have to say it.
And he didn't have to say it, and he certainly. In my mind, it just speaks to the frustration I think he feels that this is a roster. The roster they had last year was talented enough to win probably more than they did.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, obviously things always happen, whether it's injuries or regression or what have you. And I think he's, maybe not putting people on notice, but I think he's, frustrated with, okay, we've had this really talented roster these last 2 years. Gotten to the playoffs, but that's not enough. Everyone talks about, well, it's title town and like making the playoffs, just we don't hang banners for that.
Yep.
He's acutely aware of that, right? And I think he understands that it's time for the evolution from youngest team in the league, which has probably overachieved these last 2 seasons, to a true title contender.
I love Matt LaFleur. I want to ask you more about him in a second. I appreciated Goody's comment about we are in this and we are focusing on winning Super Bowls, because I listened to Matt LaFleur's end of the season presser, and it was lighthearted. I don't know that I sensed a lot of frustration, and I listened to it and I'm like, man, Matt, fans are frustrated. The season never took off at the end, and you came in 3rd in the division, and he said, well, it's a weird year. Well, some divisions are good, right? Sometimes that happens.
Yes.
And I appreciated that Goody kind of closed that end of season media period with a little, even if it was just red meat for the fans, I don't know that he'd be concerned with throwing red meat. He did it on purpose.
I'm just going to say it's not his thing.
Okay, exactly.
Right? To me, and I don't want to pump it up to be more than it is, but it's certainly a message, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's heavy-handed, but I do think it's the expectation. And it's nice for someone in the organization to put that out there, right? The idea that we understand that it's title town. We understand the expectation is to go to Super Bowls and win them. And they haven't done that in a very long time. Of course, very long time being relative, because you're talking to a guy who grew up for decades, not even seeing the playoffs. So, but the frustration is real. And I do think it's got to be frustrating if you're Gutekunst or LaFleur and you're watching the Eagles and the Chiefs in this game for the second time in 3 years, okay. To me, if you're a GM, it's like, yep, it is absolutely time to put an end to that nonsense, because, it is our time now. And that's what I hope this offseason kind of shows us.
So they have some money. We're trying to talk ourselves into maybe, a pick or some capital for somebody. But I think from a content creative perspective, what you do at Cheesehead TV or for a daily talk show, I like that there are two areas where they could use that capital to add is probably a wide receiver and edge rusher. And those are the two fun positions. Yep, we can sink our teeth into those two positions.
You're not looking at guards,
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. I think the wide receiver thing is interesting. All the names that get thrown around, everything that we've heard repeatedly since the end of the season, whether it's T. Higgins, Devontae Adams, whatever you want to throw out there, I'm thinking most of that is unlikely. I do think they add in the draft, and I know no one wants to hear that, but that's my suspicion.
How do you get a guy in the draft to solve? I think their issue at wide receiver right now is youth, because I still really like these guys. Now, Romeo Dobbs' health and Christian Watson's health, that unfortunately.
The Watson thing changes a lot.
Yes.
There's no doubt.
But I think youth is a big part of their issue, and I don't know how you solve that issue, even by if they were some crazy act to use a first-round pick on a wide receiver. I still think that issue would persist.
It'd be amazing. Right? Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, I think our perceptions and our expectations have been a bit warped publicly because there has been such an influx of talented wide receivers coming into the league who have produced right away. Right. Mm-hmm. And the old adage was always wait till year 3. The wide receivers traditionally, especially in any West Coast offense-based system, year 3 is the year they all take off traditionally. Right. I think that's somewhat accelerated now in the modern game because these guys do so much in the college game they didn't back in the day. Mm-hmm. And they grow up differently in the 7-on-7 stuff in the offseason. All of that is kind of accelerated a lot of that growth. But I do think if you're Brian Gutekunst, you're probably sitting there going, all right, he talked about it. We're going to let these guys grow and we're going to live with some of the growing pains. And I think you certainly saw that throughout this past season. But I do also think that this has been the plan. You're going to let these guys mature. And I would think the idea is that probably 1 or 2 of them are really going to blossom in year 3. Now, of course, hope is not a plan, right?
Well, that's the thing. Last year, it could kind of be a plan. I thought this last offseason, they could sit and see who pops. I don't think they have that luxury now going into next year.
I think and that's why I think they add in the draft. But I don't see them spending, you're talking about capital or like that would be a trade for Devontae or some kind of big signing, maybe Godwin or somebody like that. But even then, I just don't see that. I don't think that's part of their program. I think I could see that at corner. I could see that at edge. But at wide receiver, I would be very surprised.
Well, and fans for a long time, myself included, we want a veteran at wide receiver. And then we get Devin Funchess and we hate it. Or like if we were to get MVS this offseason.
See, MVS is the one realistic one. That I see out there, like everyone's talking about Devontae. I think the MVS reunion makes a world more sense simply because of what, obviously what it would take to get him would be significantly less. Yeah. And then 2, he adds that dimension that Watson had that you need to replace as far as being able to really take a top off of a defense. You saw it even with the Saints this year. They had no quarterback and he was still putting up numbers and was pretty damn effective. You give him Jordan Love and he could be cooking with gas again. And I'm not sitting here saying he's going to be the quote unquote traditional number 1 wide receiver, but he gives you that element in the offense. And also on top of all of this, he is a dog in the run game. Like he's a guy who's physical as hell on the perimeter, which is what you want in this scheme that the Packers run. And you want to make those big runs pop. Well, you do that by locking it down on the edge.
I'm a fan of that. Aaron Nagler is here, Cheesehead TV. I really like Matt LaFleur. I think he's great. And most of the time when people call the show and really rip him, I get where it's coming from, but I always think it goes too far. I thought he regressed this year. Scheme and in-game management. especially that Bears game. That's just drives
the Bears
me nuts.
game. That's the problem. The Bears game is so fresh in everyone's minds, and it was so disheartening.
Yeah,
how they bungled it.
Yes.
I mean, literally, that game was lost on the sideline.
Yeah,
like that's the frustrating part.
So I can take a sophomore slump from Jordan Love. I was disappointed in year 6 that Matt LaFleur took his.
Yeah,
but maybe you disagree. I thought he took a step back. What do you think?
In some ways, sure. I think it's hard because you got to pull back and look at the totality of it, because the man also did take a dude off the street, essentially, who had been in the building for like 30 days and won 2 football games with him at quarterback in the Malik Willis thing. So on the totality, I think he did a pretty good job. I think it was really frustrating that his guys kept putting the ball on the ground in some of these big games or dropping passes. That's hard to put on Matt LaFleur. But the game management stuff, 100%, it's frustrating in year 6. But I keep pointing this out this week because we are here watching Andy Reid getting ready for another Super Bowl. Well, man, that whole tenure in Philadelphia, all anyone talked about was how he had no idea how to manage the clock, utilize his timeouts. Man, he's going into the Hall of Fame. He's a pretty damn good coach. He's won a ton of championships now. It's like, can we just let Matt continue to evolve as a coach before we condemn him, please? That's my thing.
Well, and what's fascinating, I saw you tweet about this, is now out of nowhere for the first time in however many years, Packers fans are like, how did we let Andy Reid get out of the building?
I know.
Like, I love how everyone.
Now it's like, how did this happen? And look, Ron Wolf, I'm sure he would count that among, one of his biggest regrets is going the way he did. But there are a lot of factors there. Clearly, they wanted someone who had head coaching experience. And, I mean, people forget Ray Rhodes won Coach of the Year with the Eagles previously in his career. So that he went that way for that reason, and it certainly didn't work out. And Andy certainly made the most of his opportunities elsewhere.
It's just funny how the collective all of the sudden. I don't
yes.
know if there was a meeting or if someone said something, but it started coming up.
It hadn't really hit right before this season, and now all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, we had Andy Reid.
No one in 2018 when they were changing, it just is coming up now, which I think is funny. I'm entertained by it. Last thing, Sterling Sharpe, Hall of Fame. I didn't watch him. I love watching the highlights. His build, the way he moved,
right? Yeah,
he just looks different.
I just remember when he was playing, and everyone like knowing. And I mean knowing, and Bill's over here, he knows what I'm talking about. Knowing the whole building knew Sterling was going to get the ball, and they couldn't stop it. Everyone knew. The defensive coordinator knew. The hot dog vendor knew. Everybody knew. It didn't matter. He was so good. He was a man among boys. And now this is something that I have been talking about on Cheesehead TV literally for decades. And to the point where Corey, my own co-founder, has gotten sick of me talking about it. So he's probably the happiest about this, because finally Sterling is getting his due, because I always say the 2 greatest players I ever saw play the game with my own 2 eyes were Reggie White and Sterling Sharpe.
He looks different. He's built different. And Dave Schrader, WBAY, I have some audio I'm going to play next. He sounds so different from Shannon. They came from 2 different places on earth, from 2 different families. It's fascinating. Both obviously brilliant players. Thank you for the time. We will look for your coverage and your content from this week at Cheesehead TV, Aaron.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, of course. We'll be right back.